Hello YouTube viewers, welcome to my channel Science to Technology. In today's show, Rocket Monday, we're going to talk about Juno mission. So let's dive right into it. Now this mission, I've been making a lot of videos about the missions. So this is a second mission in a New Frontier program. New Horizon was the first one, this is the second one. Now you have to understand, NASA has multiple catalogs. Not every mission in NASA is like, YOLO amounts of money. Like James Webb can get as much money as they need, but other programs will get cut. So depending on your catalog, your budget is kind of limited. So this is what we call mid-budget. There are projects that are very low budget, that are like just a testing, trial run, or things of that nature. And then you have mid-budget one. This is a mid-budget one. And this sole mission was to understand Jupiter and its core. So this is second mission, and it was launched in 5 August 2011 upon Atlas V. But because this mission has been going on for almost more than a decade, the budget has started to come around. It's like, you also have to think about not only the payload, rockets and all that. You also have to figure out the costs and the salary of the people who are running the mission, basically people who are analyzing the data and all that jazz. So the total cost will be around $1.5 billion. So it's mid-tier. Now, what is the goal of this mission itself? Well, many times you will see people talk about gas giant, but generally most of the time they are focused on the moons, because again, moon have probability of life, and they have, some moons have atmosphere, some moons have liquid surfaces, some moons have flat up water trapped inside it. So there is a lot of interest there, but this mission was completely different. This was focused on one thing and one thing alone: figure out Jupiter itself. Main goal was Jupiter itself. If they can find something new and interesting with the moons and all that, just awesome. But that was not the main point. Main point is study the gas giant itself. So we wanted to understand its composition. Basically, we know for a fact it has a lot of other things also in its upper atmosphere, like ammonia, sulfates, and almost everything. Basically, it's there. So how the heck it's distributed? Is it distributed like just a thin layer of everything, or it's like everything is non-uniformly distributed based on its upper weather patterns and all that. So we had to understand the composition. Then we wanted to understand its gravity field. Now you have to understand this. Gravity mathematically can be we can describe it very accurately. So our understanding right now is, if you have something small, let's say moon, like Earth's moon, its gravity is not very smooth. So consequence of that, your orbit won't be very stable. So you have to do some weird orbit, or if you try to do low Earth orbit, you're gonna crash on moon, simply because some places you're gonna accelerate in speed, some places you decelerate and all that jazz. Yeah, it's not stable for very long time. Now, what about Earth? Earth is big. Earth's gravity is still not perfectly smooth, but still it's big enough, and the gravitational influence is very smooth. So we thought that Jupiter, huge, it's the biggest there is, so it must be very smooth. So that was also, we wanted to study it, not just guess it, study it. Magnetic field. Now the magnetic field of this puppy is enormous. It's so huge, the lines actually cross Earth. To give you a context of that, there are many people who used to think about aliens and all that jazz, and you will always hear people using background radio noises. This is the source of that. So yes, the magnetic field is that enormous. So again, we had to study this. And polar magnetosphere, because we know for a fact that this also has a radiation belt same as Earth. But again, given the intensity of the magnetic field, it must also have a much more active polar regions than Earth and Earth and other things. So we had to study these. So it was solely targeted on one thing. Compared to Cassini, Cassini was like, hey, study moons also, and it had a probe to land on a moon. Here it's like, no, it's like one thing alone: study Jupiter itself. So what about power and propulsion? Now, irony is that due to what we call peace treaty, USA can no longer manufacture plutonium, and plutonium is the primary source of heat in RTG. So RTGs are limited right now, and plutonium basically reserves they have already allocated it into different missions, like missions like Curiosity rover 2020. So Mars takes absolute priority. So for that reason, they're like, yeah, we have to prioritize that rather than this mission. So NASA was low on plutonium, so they had to use solar panel. Now I specified solar panel is no longer that useful in the distance because of inverse square law. So it's not like, okay, double the distance, half the power. It's like double the distance, square the power. Like you lose power by square. To give you a context of it, these huge solar panel, which you can see, like this is a dude. It's a huge solar panel. It's not a joke. Like it's a bigger than a truck. Huge solar panel will produce, like if you deployed it in low Earth orbit, you're gonna get upwards of 14 kilowatts of power. That's a huge. That power is so much that you can literally run 3 basic households. Like that's that much power. And once it goes to Jupiter, it's like barely giving 456 watt. So that's the problem. Like the distance wise it's far, but the power drop is ludicrous. So thankfully, because this mission is kind of recent, basically it's made by the technology of 2005 and all that jazz, it has enough efficiency that it can be done. And it was a very big milestone that NASA can do something like this, something this far out using solar power, that allows them to like have much more missions because they are no longer limited by RTGs. Again, RTG would have been better for many other reasons also, but you do what you can do. So it had one primary engine because gravitational assist and all that jazz we did into this. It is going fast, it's going so fast that the planet's gravity will not able to capture it, so we had to slow it down. So it had one primary engine, which was hydrogen and nitrogen tetroxide main engine. So basically it was bipropellant reactive system, and it worked, slowed it down. However, it had a malfunction afterwards. Then it also has 12 hydrogen monopropellant, basically to keep it spinning. Now, spinning was quite an ingenious move. The reason for that is like if you keep spinning it and if you have a magnetometer on the top, you're gonna get a band data. Right? Like let's say it's going like this. All you're gonna get the antenna data is from here. But if you keep spinning it, you're gonna get a whole range. Basically, instead of a line of data, you're gonna get a band of data. And utilizing that band, you will construct a much more rich photograph of magnetic fields. That's why the spinning is like dual advantages. And not to mention, it also helps to stabilize the spacecraft itself. So they're like we had to use solar panel, might as well have some advantage out of that. So spinning is not just for the show, it's actually beneficial not only for stability. It actually allows your same instrument to give you much more instead of single data point, it gives you two data points, basically what was in the top, what was in the bottom. And again, given the frequency of how quickly it could, like if it had RTG and it could directly read data thoroughly, it would be completely different. But again, we do with what we have. So what about the orbit? Now, because it's running on solar power, it did not even have enough space for multiple huge batteries, so it can go in the shadow. So they are like, okay, it has battery. It has batteries like whenever surplus is there, or they need some extra draw, very large draw kind of appliances. They have batteries, but it's not something like okay, 50% night time it can handle. It's like barely enough. So they had to design an orbit in such a way that it will never go into the shadow of the planet itself. So how it is that? Think of it this way: you are the sun, and this is the Jupiter. Now, if I am orbiting like this, I'm gonna go into the shadow. But what happens if I'm orbiting like this? I'm never going into the shadow. That was the main selling point of this elliptical orbit. Now, benefit of elliptical orbit is that you can go very close to the surface, like really, really close. And you want to study a planet, you want to go close to it. So it at some points have crossed around 4,200 kilometers from the surface. Now, it may sound, again, 4,000 kilometers is so far, but to give you a context, that's low Earth orbit for Earth. That's low Earth orbit. So it's going very close. And because of the orbit, how it was designed to go through the poles, there was another benefit of that. Because of the radiation belt, the whole orbit was designed such a way that you're going to go from pole and exit from the pole. So the amount of time you're going to spend in the high radiation belt would be very minimal. And this was an inherent limitation of the mission itself, because radiation going to annihilate electronics sooner or later. It's not something that you're like, okay, I'm going to put it and shield it. Again, even if shielding stops you like 5-6 orbits, after 10 to 20, 30 orbit, is still, radiation will fry your electronics. So that was an inherent limitation. So orbit mechanism was a really crucial part. And they reinforced the hell out of it. There was a electronic vault into this, which had titanium casing and all that jazz. And they built it, like overbuilt it as much they could. And thankfully, once they actually reached Jupiter and started to collect data, they were like, hey, radiation is much lower than we thought. So this is a classic scenario of prepare for the worst, hope for the best. So it actually paid off in this scenario. Now orbit is 53 days. Now you might be like, isn't that kind of odd, kind of long? Because you have to understand that it only can do meaningful scientific studies once it's close to that, and you want to spend more and more time close to it rather than further away. So this is what second engine failure cost. Like the main engine worked for deorbiting, but after that, they're like, okay, 53 days orbit is stage 1 of the mission. Stage 2 was making an orbit that was 11 days in orbit, so it would spend more time closer to Jupiter, and they can get much higher data bandwidth. What happened is the main engine, they started to run tests on pressurizing the system and all that jazz. It did not work properly, and they're like, dude, if we mess this up, we may lose even this orbit. We could crash it, or like misfiring of engine, or if the engine valve remained open for much longer. So they're like, they were not confident, so they're like, okay, let's just deal with this 53-day orbit. So the mission is not as rich in data as it could have been if the rocket engines were working professionally. But things happen. So, but again, even after this, the biggest surprise was they knew for a fact that the image sensors are more vulnerable to radiation, and you can see that in the live telecast of NASA space station. There's always like grains; those are happening from radiation. So they thought the imaging sensor will get fried very quickly. However, they're still working. So it's worked. But again, that 11 mission there was like, instead of getting 1 terabyte, we are only getting like, half of that. So that was the engine failure that like, kind of put a kink in the awesome plan. Now, what about the data that we get? Now, here's the deal. Many times we humans are very good with things, and sometimes we are bad with things. Like, to give you an example of that, we mathematically assume that there is a moon in a gas giant. That moon has an icy surface, which we could see. But somehow we mathematically assume that there will be liquid ocean below it. And sometimes there is a volcano. Water will come out. We had a pro Cassini go through that. So sometimes our mathematical models are like absolute. We predicted something and it's like, here you go. In this scenario, it's completely opposite. Like we thought this. Now again, our mathematics were not that off where we're like, okay, we thought it was made out of hydrogen, it's made out of nitrogen. That did not happen. It's just that our presumptions and our like we thought the gravity is much smooth. Turns out the gravity is much bumpier than thought. Like again, given the huge gravitational field, given the huge size of it, how the heck it has an uneven gravity? Turns out the core is no longer as stable as we thought. Like we thought core, okay, it's core is a dead thing. No, it's like it's a liquid thing that is going around, and it has a metallic hydrogen. So things have changed. Like it changed perspective on gas giant thoroughly. Like it's like you thought you knew, you did not knew anything. It's like you know nothing. John's law kind of thing happened. So NASA started to extend the mission, and the mission has been extended to July 30, 2021, because again people are not free. So by 2021, the orbit will be starting to using the basically small propellers, I'm saying small nozzles they have, engines they have, RCS thrusters. Basically they're gonna start to tighten the orbit, and sooner or later it's gonna crash. The targeted crash point is July 30, 2021. So Jupiter, in terms of the knowledge we gathered from this was very thorough. Like we learned a lot. Like we have no idea how gas giants work, and this actually started to show us like, yeah, we know very little. Like we thought the radiation belt is like this. Yeah, it is like that, but it also has some another band. We thought polar aurora will be there. Turns out there is an aurora in the equator also. I'm like, what the hell? So much we have learned due to this mission. It's mind-boggling. It's like, whoa, like this is completely different arena. It's not like the world is beautiful or we thought that it's getting confirmation. It's like we know nothing. Like we don't even know which questions to ask. So this mission was very successful, and that's in its crippled state. I'm like, I can't even imagine what you could have done if the engines were successful. And it, as a tribute, has a Galileo plaque into it, and that's a metal plaque which has Galileo's portrait, his signature, and his general entry. It's quite amazing. Read up on that in Wikipedia. It's quite amazing as a tribute, and he's gonna be cremated in the planet itself. So it's amazing, basically. So this was my presentation on the mission, Juno mission. I hope you liked it, learned from it. In that case, please click the like button, share it amongst your friends. That will help me a lot. If you didn't like it, didn't enjoy it, I'd urge you to press dislike twice to show me your disappointment. And please leave a comment because I try to reply to all of them. Subscribe, press the bell icon if you're free. And as always, thanks for watching.